Hi everyone, my name is Maya, and welcome to Psych, the podcast that explores the lives and career paths of industry leaders who use psychology to make an impact in the world. This week, I sat down with Dr. Susan Rogers, who is a professor of music production and engineering at Berklee College of Music in Boston. Now, this episode is going to be different from any others that I've ever done before. And I know I said that for the last episode, but this one is truly different, and I'll explain why in a bit. First, a little bit of background on Susan, though. Susan holds a PhD in psychology from McGill University, where she studied music cognition and psychoacoustics. But before her career in academia, Susan spent many years in the music industry. Very successful years at that, I should say. And she's perhaps most well known for her work as Prince's audio engineer. Yes, you heard that right, the Prince. She had a hand in some of Prince's most adored records, including Purple Rain, Around the World in a Day, and Sign of the Times. After Prince, she worked with many other successful artists like Barenaked Ladies, David Byrne, and many others, as both an engineer and a producer. Now, after a while, in her 40s, Susan felt pulled to go back to school and pursue her love of science, and particularly psychology. So she went to the University of Minnesota, she got her bachelor's degree in psychology, and then her PhD in psychology from McGill, and now she's able to teach at the intersection of her two passions at Berklee, music and psychology. And she hopes to continue contributing to the scientific literature in that space after she retires. So why is this episode different? Well, because 1, I was not the only one interviewing Susan. 2, the three of us sat in a real recording studio. And 3, it was videotaped, so you can actually watch this interview on YouTube. I'll post the link in the show notes so that you can click it and watch it. This was so fun. The person who is interviewing Susan alongside me is Sam Uribe Botero, who is a student at the University of Michigan. Sam reached out to me over the summer when he discovered Psych, and when he described that he's studying both psychology and audio engineering, I asked him if he knows anyone in the field who works at the intersection of his two passions, and he mentioned that one of his idols is Dr. Susan Rogers. You'll hear a little more detail at the beginning of the interview, but essentially, once Susan agreed to an interview, Sam and I thought it would only be appropriate for him to fly to Boston, because both Susan and I live here, so that we could do the interview together in person. And it was such a dream. Sam met his role model, and I got to do some of my favorite things in the world: connect two very passionate people who have mutual synergies and learn about their lives. Sam, I am still in awe that you flew all the way here right before finals to bring this to fruition, and your belief in Psych Mike's mission, it means the world to me. So thank you, and I know you know that. And I know that your dedication and your passion and your curiosity will take you very, very far, whether you choose to pursue music, psychology, or both. So thank you for bringing a new dimension to this initiative and to this interview. And Susan, thank you for your time, your insights, your wisdom, and your willingness to do this in person. Susan's reputation precedes her. You can literally look her up on Google, you'll see why. And Sam and I both knew going into the interview that this was going to be fun and animated and engaging, but it exceeded both of our expectations. And, in her life, she's been surrounded by many passionate people, by musicians who are passionate, scientists who are passionate, students who are passionate, and you can tell that she's reflected loads and loads on how we come to do the things that we love and to want the things that we want. This is a huge theme in our interview together. How do you tap into what you really want? How do you listen to your gut, to what your inner child wants, to let that inner child off its leash and to let it just do its thing? We talk about that. We talk about music preferences and science and the difference between musician brains and non-musician brains and your music profile and graduate school and mentors. And throughout it, there's just so many things that Susan says that inspire this deep self-reflection. And Sam and I have both been changed by her words. So whether you're interested in music professionally or not, this interview is just not one to miss. So feel free to click on the YouTube link in the description if you want to see us in action. Otherwise, keep listening to the amazing Dr. Susan Rogers. I am so excited to present this to you. Welcome. Welcome, Susan. Welcome, Sam. I am so excited to be doing this interview today. I wanted to start because this is a bit of a different setup than I normally do for Psych Mike. I want to tell the story of how this setup came to be. Over the summer, I started doing some promotions to different universities about Psych Mike, and Sam reached out to me from the University of Michigan saying that he studies psychology, but he also loves music, and he studies audio engineering. And he wanted to see if there was anything that he could help with on my podcast. And I was so grateful, and we had a wonderful conversation. And I asked him in passing, do you have any idols in the field who have intersected your two passions? And he said, actually, yes, Dr. Susan Rogers is someone I have looked up to for a long time. And I asked him to tell me more, and he was just so passionate about the work that you do. And I said, you know what, Sam, let's reach out to her. Let's see what comes of it. And you thankfully responded so graciously, and you took the time to meet with us over Zoom about a month ago, or maybe it was more, I don't remember at this point. And we had such a lovely time talking to you and learning from you. And I told Sam to fly to Boston and interview you with me. I'm so grateful for this. So thank you, Susan. Thank you, Sam, for flying all the way from Michigan.
Yeah, of course. I'm so grateful to be here.
Sam, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, what you love about Susan and why you reached out to me.
Yeah, so I am a third year at the University of Michigan. I'm studying biopsychology and cognitive science, but I'm also in the audio engineering program over at the School of Music. So a little bit across the field, doing multiple things, but that's exactly why I was super interested in your work. It's multifaceted. You've been in positions that I would love to get into in all multiple fields that I'm very passionate about. So I originally found your work through Prince, but I saw that you were also a professor at Berklee, teaching cognitive science, teaching psychoacoustics, and that's exactly what I've been super interested in. And so I couldn't believe that there was somebody who had taken both the music industry path, but was also studying and doing research in these fields that I was super passionate about. So I was just super excited to talk to Maya about you, and then we were able to talk to you now. So I'm super grateful to be here. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Susan, for being here. I'm very excited.
So, Susan, welcome. I don't know, would you like to give a brief introduction?
Thank you to both of you. Thanks for inviting me here. It's super exciting, isn't it, Sam? These fields that you wouldn't think would be connected, the discipline of record making and the discipline of brain science, of psychology. You wouldn't think that there's an obvious connection between them, but turns out there is. Because what isn't connected in this world today. So it's really exciting to know that more and more audio engineers are becoming interested in how the brain is processing music, and more brain scientists are becoming interested in the boots on the ground of actual record making. So the small subdiscipline of music perception and cognition it really kind of was born right around 1980. It's only been around for about 40 years. But we're now starting to see music perception and cognition courses offered in colleges and universities, and in particular in music programs. So now that intersection is happening, and that's going to give rise to folks like yourself who would like to kind of work and have expertise in both disciplines and work in both of them. So I anticipate we're going to have a fun conversation.
I'm very excited. And I always talk about how a big vision of mine with my podcast is to inspire people who love psychology to bring that knowledge and that passion into other industries as well, and to make it easier for us to talk across disciplines, because we just tend to be so siloed. Even within psychology, the subfields don't tend to talk to each other very much. And I'm multi-passionate. I'm not very well versed in music, but I love music as a human being. And so I'm just excited to explore that with you and to explore your path, because you've had such an interesting one, a non-traditional one, and an inspiring one. So thank you for being here.
So I'd love to kick off the conversation with something we talked about last time the three of us met. And you spent some time talking about the concept of one's inner child, how reflecting on ourselves as children can be a powerful tool or a powerful starting point to better understand what lights us up. And I believe you use that language as well. And also then what we should do with our lives, you know. And I think it's only appropriate to start this conversation exploring who you were as a child and what lit you up and how your love for music developed.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? When we look back on our own childhoods, I'm far further removed from mine than you guys are. But still, you know, looking back on your childhood and you remember scenes, and they're not necessarily the most active scenes. You remember that moment you had insight sitting in your bedroom or sitting at the breakfast table or on the schoolyard or just whatever, those moments where something kind of clicked for you. Those are important moments because that's a little brain that is finally made a connection perhaps between two concepts or two facts or two ideas, whatever. So I love thinking about a little human brain observing the world and gradually becoming itself. Well, a baby is a baby is a baby, but as we progress toward adulthood, we develop individuality. We develop a set of likes and dislikes, and you develop a set of desires of what you want, and you're always thinking about the future and what I think most kids are anyway. What could you be? What could you do? I just came from a hair appointment, and I have a new stylist, and we were getting to know each other. And she mentioned the question that parents always ask kids: What do you want to be? What do you want to do when you grow up? What are you going to do for a living? How are you going to make money? And a much better question is, what do you want? Not what are you going to do, because you don't know. You don't have control over that. But you do have control over what you want. I'm very interested in this idea of children learning what they want as they come up through life. I remember being feeling affection toward music, feeling warmth toward it. Music and animals, like a lot of kids, feeling really strong about it. And I grew up in Anaheim, right next door to Disneyland. And there was a radio station there, over there at the Disneyland Hotel. And you could go, and they had a glass window that separated the DJ from the pedestrians. And you could just put your face right up to the glass, and you see rows and rows of these shelves of records, and the DJ there spinning, and they had a loudspeaker outside so you could listen to what the DJ was doing. I loved that, just watching that DJ play those records. I remember being, another revelation was when I was just about 9 years old, and my cousin came over to the house, and he brought some 45s. And I had been familiar with, this was 1965, so I knew the Beatles and the Supremes and all that on the radio. But he brought James Brown's Papa's Got a Brand New Bag. When I heard, da-da-da-da-da, bump, bump, da-da-da-da, and I just had this feeling like, whoa, like, now that's what I'm talking about. So where that comes from is so interesting to me. How does a little kid say, this cereal, not that cereal, this record, not that record, this color t-shirt and not that color? Like, how do little kids decide, this is me, this is not me, and this, well, I'm open to suggestion. I think we all do that, and it's important for adults to remain open to that voice that basically tells us who we are.
You talk a lot about how, you weren't so drawn to, you knew pretty much right away, you didn't want to be the person making the music. You didn't want to be a musician. Well, how did you know?
I think it's the same thing I talk with students about at Berklee. It comes from where your happiness lies. I had a student in class this week whose family owns a microbrewery. And this student has worked for his family, for the family business, in various aspects, in sales and manufacturing, and, getting a family business off the ground. And he was describing it, and he said, but none of it made me happy. And that's why he's in college for music, because music makes him happy. Happiness is underrated. People don't put enough value in being happy. So I knew that I had piano lessons when I was a kid, and it brought me zero joy. I did not like it. It did not feel musical. In contrast, listening to the radio and listening to records brought me tremendous joy.
Just funny. I was just, Sam was at my house yesterday, and I have a grand piano because my siblings are better at music than I am. And I told him that I used to play, and he was like, what happened? And I was like, I hated it.
I just didn't like it.
I hated it. I played for 8 years because I was forced to, but I wasn't good at it, and I didn't like it, and I didn't want to practice. So it's just, but my brothers became pretty good at piano. Yeah, it is interesting to think about, how do our preferences develop even? And now I know that's something that you're actually studying. Scientifically, empirically. We'll get into all of that. So let's talk about your trajectory in music. It's amazing that you had this spark as a kid, and then you were actually able to carry that out. I don't know if everybody, most people probably aren't able to do that, or don't know how to follow that path and that spark. And what's amazing is that your favorite artist discovered you and hired you. That's incredible. And it's a dream come true, I'm sure. It was a dream come true. I'm just so curious. How did he know who you were? And why do you think he hired you, of all people?
So I was working in Southern California, and I was 26 years old at the time. I was working, I had been at my career for about 5 years. I started when I was 21. So I was in Hollywood, and I was working as the studio maintenance technician for Crosby, Stills & Nash. They owned a studio in Hollywood. And the maintenance technician is the person who repairs the equipment. That was my gig, and I liked it. But I heard through the professional grapevine that my favorite artist in the whole world, Prince, this was 1983, was looking for a technician, someone who did what I do. And as soon as I heard that, I just knew immediately, well, his search is over, because there's no one more perfect for him than me. One, he likes working with women. You could count on the fingers of one hand the women technicians in the world. And in fact, I only even heard about them. I never met any in 1983. There just weren't women technicians, but I was female and could do the job. I was a huge Prince fan. I had seen him play live when he played in Southern California. I had all of his records. I liked the same music that he liked, and I was willing to move to Minnesota, to leave Hollywood, leave LA, and go to Minnesota and be the full-time technician for this guy. So he found me through the professional grapevine. They just put the word out among the techs in LA. Prince is looking for someone who's willing to relocate to Minnesota, and no one was interested in that. Prince was
for Prince.
Well, he had just had his first crossover single with Little Red Corvette in the 1999 album, so he wasn't huge. And among the older rock stars with whom I worked, the folks I knew in Southern California, which included like Jackson Browne and the Eagles and Crosby, that crowd, Prince was he was a bit of a freak, with the makeup and the hair and the high heels and all that. So the technicians weren't interested in going to Minnesota for that gig. But as soon as I heard about it, I interviewed for it. They hired me, and off I went. It changed my life.
And so what was that transition between, because you went there as a tech, and then did you go into, how did you transition from the tech job into the engineering job?
I can tell you exactly how it happened. So the first thing I had to do with him was work in his home studio. This is before Paisley Park Studios was built, so he didn't have a facility. He lived in a house, a split-level, 4-bedroom suburban house in Chanhassen. And down in the lower level was the master bedroom, and across the hall from that was his studio, which is just basically the size of the room we're in right now, almost like a child's bedroom. Not big, but he had a console and a tape machine and monitors and equipment in there. So my first job was to pull out his old console and install a new console that he had just purchased, and I spent about a week doing that. And then he came downstairs and asked me to set up a microphone because Jill Jones was coming over and Jill was going to do a vocal. So he asked me to set up a mic, and I thought, oh shit, I'm going to be in trouble when the engineer gets here because the technician doesn't go setting up microphones. The engineer, there's an art to engineering, so the engineer is an artist who chooses which mic you're going to use for this vocal. So I was really crossing the line here, but Prince was my new boss, so I set up this mic and routed it, and I kept thinking, well, now, damn, this engineer's going to be in trouble because, he should have been here. He's obviously late. But no one showed up. And finally, Prince gave me some directive, and I asked him, well, who's going to engineer it? And he just said, you. And he pointed to the chair, and I went, right-o, boss, and, jumped into the chair. And then I realized he hired a technician, but as far as he's concerned, there's no difference between a technician and an engineer. Now, in the industry, there's a big difference. But as far as he was concerned, there was no difference. If you knew how to use the equipment, you were an engineer, which makes perfect sense. So I jumped in that chair and was only too happy to be doing that job.
Right place, right time, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know, you're the one who's really interested in audio engineering, and so you want to pick her brain a little on it.
I mean, yeah, I think, so what were some of the skills that helped you become a successful engineer? Like that position definitely has a subset of skills.
Right.
And like coming from a technician job, it's a very different subset of skills. So what were some of the stuff that you picked up from Prince or from other artists that you eventually worked with, like David Byrne and all these other guys? But what were some of the skills that maybe you found you needed to hone in on?
First, you have to have a mental library of music, and it needs to be encyclopedic for your subgenre of music. You have to really know records, because if you're working in the arts, whether you're making films or you're making podcasts or you're writing books, you're contributing to the arc of what came before, and you're helping to shape its future direction. So you really have to know records. That's probably the most important criterion. The other qualities you need to have an appetite for study. Tony Maserati, the famous record producer, told an audience of people at a conference once. He said, if any of you out here in the audience, essentially he said, if you want to be record makers and you're under 30 years old, I hope you're not going out at night and on the weekends. Because if you want to be a record maker, you're going to have to be studying every night, every weekend, in order to be successful in this. So you have to have a capacity for technical study and for, it's so sad, for cutting yourself off from other people and basically not having much of a social life as you're learning the craft of engineering and mixing and editing and file management and all the technical things you have to do in order to pursue that craft. It was the same thing in the analog era 40 years ago as the digital era today. Then you need, just like being a musician, you need certain personality traits. You need a capacity for focus and to remain focused on something for hours at a stretch. You need a capacity for delayed gratification. You can't expect overnight success. You have to be willing to suffer and sacrifice for a long time before that spotlight of attention finds you and you're ready. You're dressed, not backstage in your underwear. You're dressed and ready to go on stage. So it takes personality traits and certain interests and passions. That's all wrapped up under the crucible of where your happiness comes from. If you love it, it won't feel like sacrifice.
I definitely, slowly getting into this world, I've definitely found those things to be true. And personally, I've found that some of those same traits translate over into the research world.
Exactly.
So maybe could you talk about how these two worlds have way more similarities than differences?
I was very stunned and very happily surprised to discover, first of all, when I went to college, undergrad in my 40s, how much I would love it. I loved it so much. Grad school is difficult. I was at McGill, did 4 straight years, but I loved it terrifically. And the surprise that I experienced was, this is the most creative work I've ever done. Designing my own experiments in psychology, doing all the literature search and designing and piloting and redesigning was the most hands-on creative work I'd ever done. As a record maker, I'd worked in collaboration with others, whether I was a producer, an engineer, or a mixer. They're giving me the raw material, and I'm creatively helping them to shape it to meet their goals. In grad school, these are my goals, and this is my creativity, and it was more creative than, I think, pound for pound, than anything I'd ever done. That was a surprise. The other surprising aspect of it was I realized I'm walking the same road I've been walking my whole career. I'm just pointing 180 degrees in a different direction. So in the arts, we start with this condensed ball of dark matter, of condensed ball of what it means to be human. You explode that into billions of individual expressions: books, movies, poems, records, individual expression, works of art, plays and dances, billions of individuals expressing what it means to be human. But in the sciences, do the exact same thing in reverse. You take all these billions of observations of natural life, and your goal is to walk back toward that center of what we all have in common, a collective truth, not a personalized, individualized truth. It's the same thing, just different direction. So it's been so much fun to go in 2 directions.
Do you find yourself still toggling between them?
I love them both. I love them both tremendously. When it comes to record making, I don't want to do it anymore. Not that I don't love it. I never stopped loving it. I want your generation to do it. Music, popular music, is by, for, and about young people. It should be written and recorded and performed, produced by young people. That's who it's for. The sciences, I think, are for everybody.
So, Susan, what made you switch directions? What made you want to go from the, exploding what it means to be human in a billion pieces to taking those billion pieces and getting to what it means to be human?
As always, it was that happiness factor and listening to that inner child that wanted something. So in my 40s, I was doing a lot of records in New York, and I was engineering for the great producer Byrne, and he was doing an interview, and the interviewer asked him, so T-Bone, do you listen to college radio? And he said in that southern accent to his interviewer, he says, I'm 47 years old. There'd have to be something wrong with me if I listened to college radio. And I was 3 years younger than he at that time, and I had a flash of recognition. Yeah, I'm finally reaching that age where college radio isn't that interesting to me anymore, and yet I'm working in artists whose records are played on college radio. And that was a sense that, the sand is going to run out of this hourglass, and you're going to lose that passion you've always had for it. You're going to lose some of that. And I recognized, but I got this other passion. I had been, for a while, feeling the pull to explore the natural world. And I pictured myself just loving looking at screenshots or looking at screens of data on spreadsheets or looking through the lens of a microscope and answering those why questions about the natural world. That voice was just getting louder and louder and louder. And that's when I thought, I got to figure out a way to make this happen because I want this. And sure enough, I had a hit record in the late 90s, and with the royalty money, I was able to make that. Yeah, I was able to make that happen and make that switch to the new profession.
Now, you talk about you talk about science, your love of science, and your love of this empiricism. That's what pulled you. Why psychology?
I had mentioned earlier in our interview here that I, as a child, I was passionate about animals. A lot of children are. I am and was intensely interested in the brains of other species, these aliens among us, these, what's it like to have a different kind of brain? Do you have a different sensory organs? To think differently? If you're a dog, what are your memories like? You don't have words. What do you picture? Scenes, I imagine? I don't know. But what do you see? What do they look like to you? I don't know, that you don't have the same color vision as humans. What's it like to be a dog or a cat or an amoeba or something? I don't know. Like, I was deeply intrigued by that, and that pull was getting louder and louder. But if you enter a PhD program at age 48, your science career is going to be short, quite obviously. So it was suggested to me, like, consciousness is probably the hardest subject right now to study.
Yeah.
And you're going to have a very short science career. You'd be smart to make a contribution to music perception and cognition, because you already have some expertise in that field. So I was advised to take that route. Initially, it was not what I wanted, but it was the smart move. And this was one of the few times in my life when I've taken the smart route and not the pure desire. And that ended up working out very, very well for me.
When you started your bachelor's degree at the University of Minnesota, first of all, did you study psychology? Were you a psychology major?
In Minnesota?
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. They have something called an inter-college program where you can kind of dual major, but designing your own course path if you know what it is you'd like to do for a living. Okay. So I did that. I did that program, and I did neuroscience and psychology.
And did you know at that point that getting a PhD would be your end goal?
I knew I would have to. I knew I'd need a PhD in order to do research.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I have several audience members that have either gone back to school as an older adult or thinking about it. And it tends to be, I've gotten questions before about, for guests like you who have decided to pivot late in their career, advice for, how to deal with the challenges that you ultimately face. Going to school with people who potentially are much younger than you. So I'm curious what your experience was like, and any advice that you can offer to my audience members who are in a similar position.
It was so funny because I hadn't been in a classroom since I was 17 years old. I hadn't even finished high school. So I had no idea what to expect. Most of the people that I knew in the music business, they hadn't gone to college. They were people like me who just as teenagers, they just kind of got into it. And I knew very few people who actually had a college education. So I didn't have any preparation for that very first day of school. And I still remember it. It was a chemistry class. And I thought, okay, it's chemistry. And I thought you had to bring your books to school. So I'm carrying around all these books, these big college textbooks. I had no idea. And I'm in the auditorium, and I got a front row seat. And I'm thinking that this white-haired old guy is going to walk in with a goatee, and he looked like Sigmund Freud or something. He'd have a white lab coat on. That's a chemistry professor, right? And into the room walked this young woman who was maybe 5 feet tall, blonde hair in a ponytail, 9 months pregnant. Behind her is her husband who's carrying their go bag because she's ready to give birth any moment.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was so wonderful. It was not at all what I expected. And she did give birth. The next week, it was her husband who was filling in for her because she had just had a baby. The classes, my classmates, the learning experience, all of it was better than what I expected. I thought that the other kids wouldn't like me because I was older, and I did not find that to be the case at all. I was invited to study groups, and some of them were young people who were away from home for the first time, and they liked having kind of a mom figure there in the room, and it all just worked out really, really well. My biggest fear was, can I learn? Can an old dog learn new tricks?
Yeah.
I found out. Actually, the answer to that is hell yes. The reason is because when we are young, when we apply ourselves to really difficult, rigorous thinking, we're laying down new pipe. We're laying down neural tracks that will serve us our whole life. So all that studying I did as a young person in electronics laid down the neural infrastructure that I could then use in neuroscience later. So I didn't have to worry so much about getting a new brain. All I had to do was learn existing facts and process them on pre-existing architecture. So it was much easier than I anticipated.
First of all, you went straight from your undergrad degree to your PhD. What do you think made you a competitive applicant to the program at McGill that you applied to and ultimately got into? And then sort of branching from that, actually, let's start with that. We won't get to.
Yeah, my grades were good, but I think it was once again fortune smiled on me, because McGill has the world's highest concentration of music perception and cognition researchers. It was my first choice. It was where I wanted to be. And I applied to Daniel Levitin's lab because I knew he had worked in the music business before. And I thought, well, this guy, he'll know what skills I have. He'll know how to how to use me with my pre-existing skills. And I applied to Dan's lab, and that made me an attractive applicant because I had this skill set that he could relate to, whereas other labs that I might have applied to, they might not have known, what am I supposed to do with a record producer? I don't know, what is a record producer going to do for me? But Dan knew what I knew, so we had the same frame of reference. So I joined his lab, and in that first year, he wrote This Is Your Brain on Music, which became an international bestseller. That was good for all of us in his lab. So it was good fortune that I was able to get in there.
And you were also able to work with Stephen McAdams.
Yeah.
McAdams. McAdams?
McAdams, yeah.
McAdams, yes. Who is known for his work in music perception as well. Was McGill the kind of school where you could split your time between two different labs, or did you have to stick with Daniel Levitin most of the time?
I started in Dan's lab, but Dan's book just took off, and he was on a book tour. He was gone a lot, so he told all of the folks in his lab, you're going to have to try and find another advisor to work with. And I went to Stephen, and Stephen was happy to take me. Again, I'm quite fortunate because the guy is just a brilliant scientist. His students adore him. He's everything you could ask for in a scientist and as an advisor, a doctoral advisor. He's just the best. So he was willing to take me.
And how did these relationships with your mentors put you on the trajectory that you are now, or how important were those relationships? And how did they affect you?
That's a really good question. And if I'm being candid, I fear that I disappointed them. I fear I disappointed them because I didn't leave with my PhD in hand and go on to have a career as a researcher. I accepted a job at Berklee, and Berklee is not a teaching institution. But in hindsight, that was the smart move for me. If I had been a younger grad student, I could have gone on and I think I could have published a lot because I genuinely love the sciences. I love the research so much. I could do a lot of it. But getting that PhD at 52, you'd be well advised to combine your new knowledge and expertise with your pre-existing knowledge and expertise. Berklee is one of the few places in the world where I could do that, where I could teach my former profession, as they said, your virtual PhD in engineering and production and mixing, and also teach my actual PhD. Now, that had a wonderful kind of side and unexpected benefit in that I never knew that there'd be such overlap between these two. I'm currently writing a book that will deliver the final revision to Norton this weekend.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, we got, I say we because a co-author 2 years ago invited me to write a book on music listening, and I said yes. So we're just finishing it, and I'm taking all the things I learned as a record maker, combining it with the things that I learned as a scientist, and it's the book is presenting a new theory of music listening, a new theory of music perception and cognition.
Can you give us a little sneak peek or?
Oh, I'd be delighted to.
Yeah.
Yeah. The title is "This Is What It Sounds Like." It's borrowed from Prince's "When Doves Cry." This is what it sounds like. I'm talking with readers about 7 dimensions of your listener profile. Your listener profile is as unique to you as your fingerprints. It's that set of 7 sweet spots that light up when you listen to music that you love. The 7 dimensions, or 4 of them are musical: melody, lyrics, rhythm, timbre. But the other 3 are larger networks that respond to aesthetics, anything that we like in any medium. So the other 3 are authenticity, the genuineness, the perceived genuineness in an expression, and realism versus abstraction. Some works of art are very abstract, others are very representational. Same thing for music. And then the next one is novelty versus familiarity. So all of us have sweet spots on all 7 of these dimensions. We all have a rhythm that feels just right to our body. My favorite drummer, the late, great Al Jackson Jr., when I'm out and I hear Al Jackson Jr. on drums, I will stop in my tracks because it feels so good. It's so perfect. Someone else will just keep talking and keep walking. It doesn't light them up. Same thing with a great lyric. Or we all have melodic preferences, a wide, swooping romantic melody, or a more monotone melody, or a more cerebral melody, or a more gut bucket melody. And all of us have, some of us like records that we can visualize. For example, a record that has drums, bass, guitar, keyboards, a vocal, horns. When I listen to that record, I can get the reward that I'm craving. Reward I happen to be craving is picturing the musicians in the studio. My co-author and I last year did a very large survey study of what people visualize in their mind's eye when they listen to music.
Yeah.
My favorite visualization was picturing the musicians. I've done that since I was a child. Been stable my whole life. My writing partner's favorite visualization is abstract shapes and colors. He likes electronic music. He likes abstract music. I like realistic music. I have a strong appetite for novelty in music. Many people have a strong appetite for familiarity, for familiar forms. We're craving different rewards. Everything is the way it is because it got that way. Your listener profile got that way over your lifetime and your exposure to music. What's cool about it is it means no one can ever be a music snob. Never. You like what you like because it works for you, because it rewards you.
Scratches that itch.
Yeah. That's what the book's about. It's going through all of those dimensions, and then finally the one that we started talking about, the mind-wandering network of daydreaming and fantasies, and how the music you love is actually stimulating the mind-wandering network. That's been shown in fMRI studies.
Wow. Have you done any of those studies?
No. At Berklee, we don't have fMRI, or I don't have any fancier tools other than a very simple EEG, which is the little montage of 3 little wires. I do what I can with my simple tools, but in the bigger research universities, they can do these things.
Now, what research have you done in your PhD and since your PhD that has been particularly drawing you?
A question I'd still love to address. I regret that at Berklee our course load is 7 classes. See, most university professors teach 2 or 3.
Yeah,
we've got 7.
That's a lot.
So basically, when it comes to research, you're on your own. But the question that Berklee has allowed me to investigate is which aspects of musical practice in youth contribute to what we call the musician's brain. So it is known that the musician's brain is different from the non-musician's brain. Morphologically, shape is different, volume is different in certain areas. We know that musicians are like auditory athletes. And Maya, you've got this because you said you've been playing music for years.
It was.
But it doesn't matter. In youth, if you're listening to tones in isolation, you develop a faster, thicker, better auditory pathway. Yours is better than mine, and mine will never be the equivalent of yours. You've got, in your auditory nerve bundle, you've got extra dendritic spines. You've just got more branches on the trees, and your brain is faster, by around 100 milliseconds or so, faster than mine at categorizing sounds, at recognizing what they are. When you get older, you'll be better able than your peers, your non-musician peers, you'll be better able to pick out speech and noise. You'll be better able to recognize accents. When you're an older person, older musicians who are in the nursing home, let's say, are better equipped to recognize that thick accent in the nurse's aide who might be coming in to change the sheets or something like that. You have this auditory pathway that developed in childhood from listening to tones in isolation. What we don't know is what aspect of musical practice causes that, and are there differences? Does the piano player have the same auditory path as the horn player, as the vocalist, as the drummer? I've been able to look at that at Berklee.
So fascinating, and I'm now reflecting on my own sort of auditory processing as much as I can from my own point of view. Does it have anything to do with? I feel like I'm good at languages as well. Like I pick up languages pretty fast. Well, I also am bilingual. I grew up speaking 2 languages, so it made it easy to pick up a third. Does that have anything to do with it?
Yeah, it does. In fact, musical training confers just about the same benefits as bilingualism, which if it starts in youth. So if you're both bilingual and musically trained, you've got that superhighway. So that's what makes you really good at languages. When I was up in Montreal, I really wanted to learn to speak French, but I was in grad school, so I didn't have any time, and I just couldn't do it. So I thought to myself, let me find the hardest French word to pronounce. And if I can learn to pronounce the hardest French word, I'll probably be able to do all the others. And I chose the French word for squirrel. It's got like 5 vowels in a row or something like that. I don't remember. But it was really hard. And I practiced saying the French word for squirrel. Then I graduate. I come to Berklee. I'm making a day trip from Berklee up to Montreal to pick up a set of speakers. And I take one of my students with me who is going to help me with the speakers and get them in the car. And he's a young musician, piano player. And his name was Matt. And I said to friend Carl, see if you can teach Matt how to say the French word for squirrel. Carl says it in his French accent, and Matt repeats it back perfectly.
Wow.
First time. We know why. That auditory pathway is so much more developed and refined. His auditory cortex is better able at picking up differences in those different vowel sounds that my auditory system simply cannot process. What you are able to do is called analytic listening. What I can do is synthetic listening. And that can actually help you if you're a record maker. Synthetic listening forces you to listen to the global whole rather than the individual elements. So when I'm with students in class, I'll be playing a record, it seems to me that I'm better able than they are at recognizing intentionality, emotional intentionality, in recognizing the big picture of the record. And the things they point out that they hear are these little picayunish details that it just kind of went over my head, but that don't matter so much in the grand scheme of a record.
Interesting, because you're both. You do both. Like you play music and you also engineer it.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what, if anything has popped up for you.
Yeah, I mean, at least, that's as someone who's learning to mix, who continues to try to do it all the time, I take hours out of my day to when I have something on my plate, it takes a while, but I think it's a skill to be able to, obviously you have to get into all these nitpicky details and you have to clean certain things up, but it's definitely a skill that I will continue to have to learn, to take a step back and try to listen synthetically. Yeah. Has there been any research done, or do you have any thoughts on musicians or people who have more of this analytical listening? Are they able to take that step back into the synthetic listening stage, or has there been anything looking into that?
Someone asked me that question last May. I gave a talk to one of those lunchtime lesson talks, a Zoom corporate lunchtime talk, to Universal Audio out there in this very famous company that's been around forever. They're out there in the West Coast. And one of the fellows asked me, can an analytic listener learn to hear synthetically? As far as I know, I don't think you can.
Wow.
But you can practice it and you can get better at it. When you asked me earlier what qualities a recording engineer needs, one of the first things I said was you need a music library in your head. Exactly. All the music that you listen to is filtered through all the music you've listened to in the past. So as you're listening to music, as you're making a record, whether you're listening to a rhythm track or an individual performance, or you're listening to a mix that's nearly finished, as you're listening, what you have to be able to do is call up from long-term storage other examples of other records that have achieved similar thing to what you'd like your record to do. And then you have to scan that auditory signal in short-term memory. And my doctoral thesis was on auditory short-term memory. So you have to scan the active trace and you have to ask yourself, what isn't working? And you're constantly looking for flaws. Is it the sounds? Is it where the musical weight is distributed? For example, let's say you've got a singer who's got a very soft little voice, very soft, and a very narrow little range, and has a hard time getting up to those high notes, but is very artistic, very expressive. That's all they got. That timbre, that voice, that musical instrument is not going to be able to carry the whole picture, so to speak. It's like casting a movie. If you've got child actors, think of the early Harry Potter movies. When you got child actors, you have to cast that movie with some of the cream of the crop of the British theater scene, because you need these heavyweights to carry some of the dramatic weight in the picture. And it's the same thing in records. So if you've got a voice that you really can't carry a lot of music, as we say, you need your arrangements and your other performances to carry more of the weight. You need to make this an ensemble piece so that the listener can move their spotlight of attention around and always have something cool and interesting and musical and expressive to be focusing on. Now, if you've got a great singer, if you've got an Adele, you can do what my old colleague Greg Kirsten did with Adele's Easy on Me, is the single that Greg just produced with her. Kick drum and vocal, a little bit of piano. Because you've got an actor who can basically take the stage all alone and give you a great performance.
Right.
So that's kind of what a record producer's, that's what they do, is they're scanning a whole object, imagining the weight, where it's going, and imagining how listeners are moving their spotlight of attention, and imagining what rewards that listener's going to get from those lyrics, from that melody, from those timbres, from those rhythms, and from the general style that you've built.
So this kind of leads to my next question. So in what ways can non-scientists take from like the research questions that you've been asking and incorporate into different practices in their own lives, whether that is like being a record producer, or simply like something outside of that, you know, not just knowledge for knowledge's sake, but knowledge in a more practical sense?
I'm not sure I understand. So non-scientists, to get what?
to get, you know, because you've been asking all of these.
You mean like okay, so maybe the angle is like audio. How can, you know, audio engineers take from the findings that we know from psychoacoustics and music cognition and all of the things that you're studying empirically? Do you think that science can help them do their work better?
Yeah, I understand. I'm tempted to say no. I'm tempted to say no because, in the studio, you're not thinking about the rules. You're not thinking about the actual concrete outcome. What's going on in the listener's brain when they listen to your work. You're really driven by the passion. You're in creation mode. You're in art mode. You're listening for and hoping to acquire inspiration. You're in the arts, and you're competing with other people who are in the arts. And as I spoke about earlier, you're exploring your unique individual expression. What's the best record we can make from this song? And you have no idea what the answer is, and no one can tell you what the answer is. No one can tell you. All you can do is try and trust your instincts and feel that connection with that record within your own listener profile, and feel like, I believe we got it, because I think there are enough listeners like me who will like this record. Not everyone will like it. That's impossible. But I think enough people will like it. So you're so focused on that individual expression that to turn around and go the opposite way on that trajectory and start thinking about what's good for all of us, or what works for all of us, or the science of all of us, I think it'd mess you up. I think you have to, when you're making art, you have to be an artist. And when you're making science, you have to be a scientist.
It's interesting. And I think a lot of my audience members who are interested in going into academia, whether that's in the music realm or not, or in the auditory realm, you know, they think about, and I've thought about, you know, once you do the science, once you conduct the research and you publish it, who's it for? Who reads it? Who picks it up? I mean, usually it's other scientists, you know, who are interested in the pursuit of knowledge. And so I just wonder, like, is a goal of yours to make this science accessible to non-scientists, or is that just not that important to you?
Oh, you know what matters to me? The reason I said yes to writing this book is that, well, I love both of these things so much, and it's my hope that folks like you, Sam, will read this book and be a more informed record maker.
Yeah.
A more informed record maker. You're scientifically curious, so there's enough science in there to make you go, oh, that's really cool. I didn't know about that. That's really, really cool. That's fun to know. But the common thread throughout the book is listening. And what I hope to convey is that each of us has this processing engine under the hood that's going to be a selfish listener. And it's going to listen for the rhythms it likes, the sound design that it likes, the lyrics that it likes. And you cannot tell it what's good or bad. You cannot tell it what it should listen to. You can't rank order its own preferences for it. That every listener is going to take in that record and be hunting for treats, and they may or may not find them. The only way you can hope to even compete in that marketplace is if you are in close contact with the treats that you receive from music listening. You know where the rewards are found, so you're going to make records that provide those rewards for you, and with luck, other listeners who share some of those. No one's listener profile is going to be exactly like yours, but there'll be some overlap.
You mentioned something earlier in the interview about science being creative, and that when you went back to school, you realized this was one of the most creative, if not the most creative endeavor of your life. Sam, you had a question about this that I thought was brilliant.
So, in what ways has your experience in the science led to creative processes that you would not have expected? And how does this directly or indirectly correlate to creative processes that you learned in previous fields?
One of the things that my science education did for me is to help me understand archetypal thinkers. We had a lecture in grad school from the great Bill Verplank. Bill Verplank from Silicon Valley is credited with being one of the inventors of the computer mouse. And he went up to the whiteboard and he talked about archetypes. And he put 4 archetypes on the board. The archetypal artist, the visionary. The visionary comes up with an idea for something and then brings it to the engineer. The engineer is the archetype who is grounded in logic and physics and reason. And so the artist and the engineer collaborate and they build a prototype. It doesn't matter if it's a record, a demo of a record, or if it's a software, or if it's a personal computer. And then after they've finished with their product, they need another archetype. They need the entrepreneur. They need a person who knows something about people and complex social relationships to sell and market this product and advertise it. And then when the 3 of them are done, they need someone who can go out there into the marketplace and compete with them, for their product. So they need a competitor. Bill actually called it the bully, but I like to call it the competitor. These people who live to win, to be number one. As Bill was doing all this, I recognized artist is not my archetype. I've worked with some of the great ones. I've worked with David Byrne and Prince and Stephen and Ed, Barenaked Ladies, and Greg Kirsten, Tommy Jordan of Gagita. I know visionaries. I know extreme visionaries. I'm not one of them. But as soon as he described the engineer, I recognized right away, that is so me. That's me. It's how I think. It's how I solve problems. That's me. And that's why I've been a great partner for artists. I know I'm not an entrepreneur. I'd be the world's worst if I had to sell something for a living. And I'm not a competitor or a bully either. So, to answer your question, the mental skill set that I brought to record making was primarily that of an engineer, someone who understands systems and can put a studio together, repair a home studio in the middle of the night if something breaks. I'm bringing the same skill set to science. I'm a systems-oriented person. I'm really good at studying and understanding systems, which is why I love neuroscience so much, because it's an understanding of systems. It's great. I will never be a great visionary in the sciences any more than I was a great visionary in the arts, but I'll be a very capable achiever of ideas. I'm good enough to get by. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about knowing yourself and knowing your skills, knowing what kind of thinker you are is vital to finding happiness in your career.
We'll come back to that in sort of the last section of the interview, but I do want to spend a little time on the intersection of psychology and music. Perhaps. So, you studied psychology at McGill, but you were able to hone on music cognition and psychoacoustics, which actually I don't think everybody knows what that even means. So, if you could first define what is psychoacoustics, what is music cognition, that would be amazing, and then we'll sort of jump into a little discussion.
Okay, so the larger field, music perception and cognition, kind of encompasses 2 ways of asking and addressing the same questions. Music cognition refers to the cortex mainly and the kinds of thinking that we do when music is a stimulus. In music cognition, they study learning music, they study music performance, they study music and memory, music and aging, musical development, what do babies know and when do they know it, music and emotion. Those are studied in a music cognition class. Psychoacoustics is interested more in the mechanism. That's the bottom-up aspect of auditory processing. So psychoacoustics delves more deeply into the ear, the hearing mechanism, the subcortical processing, the auditory brainstem stuff, and how complex auditory signal can be organized, perceptually organized in such a way that you can independently decide to attend to just the rhythm or just the lyrics or just the melody in a record, let's say. So some of the sensation and the perception stages of auditory processing, that's more the domain of psychoacoustics, whereas cognition is more the individual differences among people.
Now, is what you're writing your book on right now, would you say that's what's riveting you, or are there other sort of research questions that you're hoping to explore?
Oh, it's sad. It's sad because I fantasize, what would it be like if I were 30 years younger and I would just, I could have my life ahead of me as a research scientist. That's a nice fantasy, but that's not going to happen. I am excited that I've written this book. It'll be out in the fall, and I am delighted thinking that there might be young producers or engineers who might gain some valuable insights from it. But I'm gonna retire from Berklee after this next spring semester. So when the book comes out, I'll be retired. I'm going to move to the country, and I'm hoping that in the very last stage of my life, I can really make a contribution to science. If I don't have to teach anymore, I won't have a laboratory, but some folks have offered to collaborate with me. I can probably do some theoretical work. And so I can hardly wait. It's going to be fun. And I love my students. I love my college. I love the kids so much. So many of them have become my dear friends, people I adore. There's nothing driving me away from Berklee other than just my age and a desire to spend some time of my life just purely working in the sciences. Having done a PhD and aspiring now to make a significant contribution to science, what to the audience members who are listening right now who have similar aspirations, whether it's in your field or not, do you have any words of advice about, perhaps they're deciding whether, do I really want to pursue a PhD? Do I really want to spend the next, 4 to 7 years really devoting my life and potentially having zero balance for the next several years to study this thing. Do you have any advice on how do you make that decision? How do you make that leap? And who is it right for? Right. It's interesting. The reason I want to contribute to science is I want to be part of the conversation. I want to absorb the conversations of the people who are doing it. I want to read their books. I want to see them at conferences. If the microphone is passed around the table and it comes to me, I'd like to be able to add to the conversation. That's the motive. Wanting to be at that party, behind that velvet rope, at that party, having conversations with these people. That's what you want. And it was the same thing in the music business. I didn't want to just be a person who loved listening to records. I wanted to have a voice in the conversation. I wanted to be on the other side of the velvet rope. And I wanted to make some records too, so I could be a part of it. In no case have I ever fantasized about being the best or number one or anything. That never occurred to me. I certainly never thought about making money. Good luck. Good luck in the arts and in the sciences. That shouldn't be the biggest motivator. I didn't think about prizes either. I wanted to be part of the conversation. So to answer your question, if you're deciding whether or not you want to get a PhD, ask yourself, is this the party I want to attend? Are these the people I want to listen to? Are these the people I want to talk to? Are these the conversations I'd like to join? Or does that sound like not fun? Does that sound not fun? I'll tell you, a couple of years ago, a young woman, a biology major at Northeastern, made an appointment to come to my Berklee office to have an office hour with me. And the reason she wanted to see me was because her boyfriend was in the major where I teach, music production and engineering. So he was an MP&E student, and those music production and engineering kids, they're up all night. Our studios are available to them from 6 p.m. until 6 a.m. So they work all night. And as usual, the poor boyfriend had worked until 6. He drug himself home at 6:30 in the morning. He gets into bed. And she said, "Why are you doing this to yourself? And he said, it's the only thing I love enough that I would happily beat myself up for. I love this so much. Yeah. And she said it was like an epiphany, a light bulb went on, and she realized, I don't feel that way about biology. So she came to see me and she asked, should I be feeling this way about biology? I mean, I couldn't answer that question for her. I don't know. But I do know that in both careers, my engineering career and my science career, I've loved it. I've loved it. And loved it enough to sacrifice for it. Loved it enough to marry it. I mean, that's... You can have music as your hobby, as your friend, or you can have music as your partner. And if you make that commitment to music, you have to really sacrifice for it like you would in a marriage. It's going to disappoint you. It's going to let you down. And you're beholden to it. You have to go to the studio on those days when you don't feel like going. You got to work really hard and sacrifice a lot. Same thing with the sciences. Are you going to marry it, or are you just going to have it be your friend?
Mm-hmm. And you knew from just, doing your undergrad degree that you wanted to marry it.
Oh, yes.
Were there any experiences that you had in undergrad that solidified to you, or was it just this like inner calling that you just knew?
I just loved it so much. I loved it so much. I loved all the things that I was learning, and my professors, and the things that I was curious about. Those daydreams, those fantasies, the things that I wondered, what is my dog thinking when she's remembering herself? Those questions. I was in a room where people were talking about that. I was reading textbooks where they described that. It's what I wanted. Yeah. It's not everyone wants a career. A good life involves, as Sam Harris, the philosopher, said, a good life involves waking up every day to work that is interesting and difficult. Interesting enough to get you out of bed, difficult enough to keep you awake, keep you at it. But that's only one aspect of life. I mean, there's husbands and wives, and there's children, and there's a social life, and there's just so much more. And members of my family, all of them, in fact, I was going to say some of them. No, all of them. I'm the only one that has a college degree in my family. All the rest of them valued marriage and children and early retirement and all the good things in life that they have. They're just as happy as I am and as successful. I'm the only one who wanted a career.
Successful. I watched an interview that you did, and I don't remember where it was. I'll find it later and I'll put it in the show notes so that I can give it credit. You spent some time talking about the definition of success and how important it is to let yourself reflect on that and only ask yourself, like, what does success look like to me?
Right.
And, this is a psychology podcast or a psychology careers podcast, but at the core, what we really want is to find something that that we love, that is in line with our values and our strengths and our passions, and that makes the impact that we want to have, and we want to be successful at it. But what does that even mean? And it's hard to define that for yourself when there's so many other voices, telling you what you should do and what that should look like. So I just want to open that up with you, and I think you're a wonderful person to offer advice on that front.
Oh, thanks. There are so many rewards to be had from our careers, and individuals might want one of them and not really care about any of the other rewards. Speaking of the music business, our kids at Berklee, what are the potential rewards that someone in the music business might want? They might want fame. They might want money. They might want just the capacity to express themselves. They want to be able to write songs about their experience and to be self-expressive. They might want aesthetic or intellectual stimulation. They want to be always inventing or creative. They might want the lifestyle. They might just want to hang out with other musicians and go on tour in a van. That's a big part of it too. So there's a set of rewards that come with every career. And I think all it takes is one. But we do have to identify what do I want, so that you'd be willing to pursue what you want and to say yes to the right opportunities and to say no to those opportunities that aren't going to allow you to get what you want. For example, in the music business, I can do this more easily for music than I can for psychology, but I ask the students, all right, pretend it's January 1st and you have a manager, and the students I'm talking about here are record makers, engineers, producers. Imagine it's January 1st and you have a manager, and your manager has come to you and said, great news, the phone has been ringing. You've got two choices of what you can spend the next year doing. You can spend the next 365 days working on a massive project with a major artist. Let's call it Beyonce or Adele or whatever. It doesn't take a full year, but for sake of argument, let's pretend. You can spend the next year working on an Adele record that is guaranteed to win Grammys, to sell or stream billions of units, guaranteed success. Or you can spend the next year doing 3 records with debut artists. They used to call them baby bands. Debut artists who are artistically interesting, but no one knows them, and there's no guaranteed chance of success. Pick one. Now, there's no better or worse, but if you pick the Adele record, you're saying, I want success. I want billions of streams. I want a Grammy nomination. I want the rewards that come from working with a high-level artist. I myself and many of my students would pick the other choice because what we want is the artistic stimulation. I want variety. I want to work with these unknown bands. I want to discover things. I want to explore the question of what music is. And I want to spend this next year experimenting and discovering what music is. That tells me that my reward is intellectual stimulation, aesthetic stimulation. So it's the same thing in the sciences. Think of all the possible rewards and then ask yourself, which one do you want? And then imagine a scenario where you could have some of them but not all of them. Which one would you pick? Running your own lab, let's say, in a small college that's off the map, or being a postdoc in a well-known research institution? Do you want more publications, or do you want the publications that you do to be more impactful? What sort of journals would you like to see your work appear in? Because they have different levels of prestige. What is your dream?
What if I don't know, Susan?
That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you don't know, consider that maybe you're happy. Consider that just maybe your wants are being met. And if you are, why mess it up? Why mess it up? Like maybe you have what you want.
Sam, you it's just like you're multi-passionate. I'm also multi-passionate, but you have multi-passions in similar realms as Susan does. So I just want to open up a discussion about being multi-passionate and do you have a question for her about?
I mean, so many.
Yeah.
But like, you may have answered this with previous answers, but I have a privileged dilemma. I bet a bit. I'm studying 2 wonderful things that I'm very passionate about, and I have for the past few years I've been trying to find this like marriage between them, and the goal would be to pursue both in some sort of capacity. But at the end of the day, is that very viable? I'm not sure. There's 2 different like separate career paths, and my question would be, for someone who is both interested in like academia and research, but also is interested in the music industry, obviously the question comes back to, what are my daydreams? Where's my happiness lie? But do you have any other advice that you might give for someone who's interested in 2 separate fields?
There are folks with terminal degrees, with PhDs, who are making a contribution to the arts. And, well, I was thinking of musicians, but right now I'm thinking of Maya Bialik, who got her PhD in neuroscience and then was called to act again in that TV show, The Big Bang Theory. And I wonder about her. I've seen her on TV commercials, and I wonder, are you getting to do any science at all or what? Because she was a child actor, and then she made some money and got a PhD, and then they called her back in. But I'm also thinking of Floating Points, a neuroscientist.
Yeah.
That's his artistic name, and Floating
I love
Points.
his stuff.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful stuff. In today's world, it is possible to get that PhD and to have a side career making music. When I was at the University of Minnesota, a fellow in the lab, Dr. Mark Stelmach, was a young PhD in psychoacoustics, and he had a home studio with his drums, and he was a big fan of punk music. So he made records on the side. Would that be satisfying to you? So you'll have to ask yourself that question about, what does success in the music business look like to you? Is it Grammy nominations and billions of streams, or is it just being able to do it and to have enough fans that you can release material? Would you need to tour? Would you need to? And in most cases, for a higher level of success, the answer is yes. You have to be out there on the road. You have to be playing live. You have to follow up with the records that you make with new records, and you have to be performing on a stage. That's part of it. And that's gonna dilute your science career. Would it make you unhappy to dilute your science career? You don't know. There's too many unknowns.
Yeah.
They'll both. The good thing is that the opportunity to do either one will always be there. If you can get a PhD at age 52, you could definitely postpone your science work right now and focus exclusively on music, or try to do them both simultaneously. I had a funny conversation with a student in class yesterday. I've been really tough on this young woman in class because all signs indicated that she was on an engineering path and that she was going to be really good at it. So I held her to a high standard. She'd be sitting there in that chair, and I'd be, come on, you'd be encouraging her and pushing her and just really pushing her because she's smart and she's really good. She came to us from McGill, so very competent person. She wants that engineering path, so I've been pushing her really hard to make her really great. And after class, she says, I'm thinking of getting my PhD in psychoacoustics. And I said, Leah, I've been beating you up this whole semester. I just thought you wanted to be an engineer. She said, no, I've been very focused on engineering this past year, and I don't like it that much. And it was that immersive focus in engineering, doing almost nothing else. She did almost no production or anything, just engineering, that made her realize this isn't intellectually stimulating enough for me. I like it. It's challenging enough, but I don't like it. I'm not ready to make the full commitment to it. I need that intellectual stimulation. She said, there's just parts of my brain that feel like they're atrophying. I want to earn a PhD. So you'll kind of know. I guess it's a long-winded way of saying, maybe try each one for a year exclusively. Examine what it is you're missing and see if you need to pick it up as a friend, or if you need to divorce the one profession and marry another one.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
At the core of a lot of what you talk about, Susan, is the who am I'm synthesizing this as we speak, so I don't know if it'll make any sense, but I'll try. This question of who am I? Who am I as what lights me up? What do I daydream about? And then also, more broadly, what it means to be human. Right. I'm not sure if the two are related, but I feel like they are. Like you are so endlessly curious about the human condition, about what makes us us. And well, I don't know exactly where I'm going with this, but there was something about the way you talked about how we should pay attention to our daydreams, should pay attention to what lights us up, and who, what moments come to mind when we think about ourselves as children. What are those scenes that are salient in our minds? And so I guess, well, you know what I want to know? I want to know what lights you up.
Oh, yes. So before I answer the specifics of that question, your question made me think about the difference between liking and wanting. Liking is a hedonic response. Little infants, laboratory rats, they like the taste of sugar, and their face will make a happy face when they taste sugar. They like it. Wanting is deeper and more widespread. The neural networks of our brains. Wanting is more powerful. You're sitting in class, and a student plays a record, ask the other students what they think, and a kid says, "It's good, I like it." It gets you nothing. No one's going to go out and buy a record that they like. Go out and buy. You see how old I am? That's what we used to do. You used to go out and buy them. But no one's going to work to get a record that they like. It's simply pleasant if it happens to come along. But we'll work for what we want, because wanting means somewhere down deep inside you recognized, this is essential to me. This is necessary for my well-being. So I would encourage you now to answer your question, or to eventually get there to answer your question. When you experience something that gives you this feeling of motive and desire, where you say, I want that. What wants it? What wants it? What does it want? What part of your brain? There's a part of your brain that's saying, give me that. Give me that. Go to a museum. Go to an art museum. See stuff that looks good. I like it. It looks good. But holy moly, when you stop in front of something that just rocks your world and you run your eyes over it and you say, I can't even imagine the mind that thought of that. That's your brain saying, whatever that is, I want that. I want that. I want my brain to do that. I want to keep looking at these things. Sigmar Polk brought me to my knees, not figuratively, but almost literally, because Sigmar Polk, if only I could think like that. And there was a Picasso exhibit a few years back in New York, and seeing this bicycle seat as a bull's head and running your eyes over it and thinking, all right, imagine that your mind thought of that. What would your mind have to do in order to think of that? And going, holy shit. How genius would I be if I thought of that? Reading Vladimir Nabokov. And he's more brilliant on one page than I've ever been in my whole life. And he does this on every page. So the feeling that I just recognized something that represents what I'd like to be. This represents something that is me, down deep inside, something that's never been expressed. I'm not an artist. I don't write novels, not a musician. But when I hear Al Jackson Jr. on drums, if I could play drums, that's exactly how I would play drums. It's almost like that's my body playing that music. And it's a little bit like falling in love. And this is in the final chapter of the book. We equate love at first sight with the records that you love. I remember my very first love at first sight moment. He was no prize. He was no prize on paper or otherwise. But I fell in love with him instantly when I first saw him. We're still friends today. Science can't explain that. It hasn't yet, anyway. So be attuned to that little part of your brain. You take it off its leash, let it run around in the dog park of its desire, and it's gonna say, I want this. And that's you. That's the deepest you that there is. That's you.
Wow.
Gotta take a moment to just let that soak in. I feel like that segment is the type of segment I'm gonna keep coming back to in my life. There are moments when you sort of lose yourself. not in a good way. I mean, there's also the losing yourself in a good way. But I mean, there's moments in your life where you kind of feel like you're fumbling. You don't really know what you're doing or why. And yeah, just the way it's almost musical, the way you talk about it.
I think when we're young, I was thinking about this morning, when we're young, we're very, 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 very powerfully tempted to do the right thing, to want to know what the right thing is. We don't know. We haven't lived long enough. Haven't lived long enough to know what the right thing is. So we reason it out. I think I should do this. This makes the most sense. But in doing that, we forget there's another system at work. Daniel Kahneman talked about it in the book, Thinking Fast and Slow. We forget we've got a gut instinct that knows stuff that the slow part of our brain, the logic reason part, doesn't know.
Yeah.
And when we're young, we mistrust that gut instinct. We're afraid it might lead us into making mistakes. We might be rash. We might look stupid. We might be foolish. It's important with young artists, and I suppose with young scientists too, to recognize the wisdom in that gut instinct, as well as the wisdom in that logical decision-making part of your brain. Listen to both. Don't be afraid of that gut instinct. Don't be afraid of that child. That child is. You want that kid. You want that child.
Yeah.
You want that child to stay with you forever. It has a lot of fun in life, and you want to have fun in life.
And it knows what it wants.
It knows what it wants, yeah. And there's nothing, that's a great thing. Isn't that fun when that happens, when you know what you like?
Oh, it's the best.
Yeah.
It's the best.
Yeah.
Just everything convenes into like one small point, and it becomes so clear. And that doesn't happen. I feel like I definitely have over time sort of silenced my gut, my what my child self would want. I'm sort of rediscovering her again. And I actually think the catalyst was the last conversation that you had with us. I've been reflecting on it a lot, and I'm really happy that this is now going to be public for lots and lots of people to reflect on.
Maya, I get the strong sense that you're really good at this.
Oh, yeah.
This podcasting thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know you well, but I get
you.
the sense that you could be a star.
Thank you.
In this kind of field, if you like it and if it makes you happy.
I want it. More importantly,
you've got the talent. You've got the talent for it.
She really does.
Thank you.
I'm remembering a student. This is about 5 years ago. I'll call him Bill. And Bill had just graduated, and he wanted to meet for lunch, so we met campus. And Bill was almost shaking as he was talking about his future plans. And most of the students I teach, their future plans are, I'm going to move to Los Angeles and get a job at the Village Recorders, and I'm going to work my way up toward being a record maker. So we're talking, and he's kind of pale, and he's kind of trembling a little bit. And I thought, there's something going on here, Bill. But we didn't finish our conversation at lunch, so we agreed to meet a second time. So we met a second time, and it was even worse than before. We're sitting across the table from each other, and he's telling me, well, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that. And I said, Bill, I'm going to ask you a question right now, and I want you to blurt out the answer and not think about it. Answer me instantaneously. What do you want? And he said, I want to sit on the couch and watch TV with my girlfriend. And he started to cry. I said, there it is.
Wow.
There it is. Turned out he was in love. He was dating a grad student at BU, and she had another year of college. And he was in love, and he didn't want to leave her. And he was terrified of telling his parents and his friends and his teachers, my whole life I've been saying I want to be a recording engineer, and guess what? You just spent $150,000 on tuition, and now I've decided that I want to sit on the couch and watch TV with my girlfriend. But what kind of an engineer is he going to be if he's miserable?
Yeah.
He could be doing engineering here in Boston. There's studios here. He can be doing anything. And maybe what he wants to do is work in television. Who knows? But it was his happy future is never going to happen until he says, that's what I want. He stayed in Boston. year later, he and his love moved out to Los Angeles. I've lost touch with him now, but I hope everything's going well. The important thing is ask yourself that question and answer it honestly.
Yeah, and there's definitely something to the thing that you made him do, which is don't even think about it, just answer me right now. Yeah.
What do you want?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Because we analyze. We fall into our rational brain, which is good sometimes, but sometimes it's just like, shut up. Like, just let me tune in for a sec.
And I never thought that the gut was as smart as the brain. I thought the gut, you're just being selfish here. It is smart. The times in my life when I haven't listened to it, I've regretted it.
Yeah.
It does know what it's talking about, in a sense.
Yeah. I think we're moving towards the end here. Sam, is there anything else that you wanted to ask that, before we wrap up?
I mean,
okay, if not.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm so grateful for being able to talk to you, and thank you so much for the advice. I'm still in a place where I'm figuring out those steps, and I'm figuring out.
As am I.
Yeah, we all are. And you end up doing that for a great portion of your life, but just knowing what I want, I think, is going to be very crucial, and just being able to be honest with myself.
Right, because what you want is telling you who you are.
Exactly.
It's and quite naturally, we want, like going back to the Bill Verplank lecture, we want to be of service. We want to take the brain that we have, the who we are, the unique print of who we are, and you want to put that in service of something where you'll be valued and where you'll do a good job. Had I thought to take my love of records and become an A&R executive or a music manager or something like that, I would have been awful at it. I wouldn't have had a happy life or a happy career, because I would be applying the brain that I have to a skill set that I don't have. So starting with what you want and exploring the kind of thinker that you are, how you like to solve problems, the work environment in which you'd like to be. Where do you do your best thinking? Do you do it alone in a room when they shut the door? Or do you do it in collaboration with other people where you're all passing that beach ball around the room and you're all sharing a creative process? Do you like the idea of working in the daytime or working at night? You want to keep your own hours, or do you like rigid fixed hours? Thinking about those kinds of things and having your body find itself in the place where your mind is anyway, that's a good life.
Yeah.
If your body can be doing what your brain is fantasizing about, you're living a good life.
Yeah. Oh, man. Wow. Is there anything else that we haven't asked you about yet that you think is important? And
I want to share one little story from grad school. Eve-Marie and Anjali, brilliant young women, grad students in Daniel Levitin's lab. And Anjali came to us from Stanford with a master's degree, and Eve-Marie, who's from Montreal, I believe she also had a master's too when she joined the lab. Eve-Marie was and is a clinical psychologist, specializing in autism research, very happily so. Now, Anjali was going down the same path I was going, which was experimental psychology. And Anjali discovered after a couple of years in grad school, she simply couldn't stand it anymore. Just looking at spreadsheets alone in a room, Anjali discovered that the work environment she wanted to be in was with other people. She didn't want to be alone in a room in the dark, and she switched her direction from experimental psychology to clinical. She also studied autism and earned her PhD in a happier setting for her, that clinical setting. The setting that made her very happy, being around other people, would have not worked for me at all. It wouldn't have brought out the best in me. Not that I wouldn't have liked it, but I wouldn't have done my best thinking in that environment. So if you're in grad school in psychology, it's important to think about the environment in which you're going to do your best work, where your brain is going to be running at full speed. Find that environment and don't be afraid to ask for it.
And it may take some trial and error, right?
Yeah.
It's not always, your first try. You may think you want something, try it out, and it's not exactly what you thought it would be.
Right, like the student I mentioned in class yesterday who's been basically doing just engineering for the past year and discovered, nope, this isn't what I thought it was going to be if you're doing it day in and day out.
Yeah, and when you were telling the story about Bill, your student Bill, the moment where he was thinking about his parents, oh no, you just spent $150,000 on my education, and look I don't want to do what I was studying. I don't think, we alluded to this. I don't think that's a waste of time, at all. You had to, he had to try it to know he didn't want it.
One of my students, Terry Lefcourt, is a physician now. He's a medical doctor. He's doing emergency room medicine out in Colorado. He was a music production and engineering major.
Wow.
Yeah, and we've had students go on to law school and go on to other professions. They get that degree and they discover, all right, you have to climb up the mountain a little bit to get a better view of other mountains. And sometimes you decide to keep going, or other times you say, okay, I like this height where I am, but I'm going to jump over to a different mountain.
Yeah.
Go from there.
Yeah. I like that analogy. The question I always ask at the end of interviews is what skill, quality, or general factor, it does not have to be intrinsic, but it can be, has served you no matter where you went in life?
I didn't always have it, but I developed it and made it stronger. And I think that's the skill of giving people the benefit of the doubt. The skill of recognizing most bad behavior comes from, it's more likely to come from fear than from anger. Most bad behavior is people making mistakes. They didn't mean to do it. So the skill of being patient and tolerant with people, not taking perceived insults personally, recognizing that, maybe they're just having a bad day, or maybe they didn't mean to do that, or maybe whatever. That's something that I think you develop as you get older, and it's really nice to have. It's really nice to be tolerant of other people.
It's funny. I spent this morning doing a little bit I was reading the book of a psychologist who I will interview next month. His name is Dr. Dan Tomasulo. And he is a clinical psychologist who focuses a lot on positive psychology in his practice. And he was writing about how it's important to do these almost visualizations of who you are in the future, who you want to be, and write them down, and write them as if they're in the present moment, like I am XYZ. And one of the qualities that I wrote down this morning when I did this exercise is I am tolerant. And it's something that I'm really trying to cultivate. And it's not that I don't have that, but it's something I think we can all always continue to expand. And so I just thought it was interesting that you brought that up today.
It feels good. You're mad at somebody. Let's say you're mad at somebody and you're emotional and you really, you're rehearsing in your head, I want to say this. But if you've got enough time, and I hope you do, and you can stop and you can think, what's that going to sound like to receive? And you realize it's going to hurt that person if I say that. All right, well then I won't say it. I'm gonna express myself, but in a way that takes into account this person's frame of reference, this person's blind spots. They don't have the same information that I have, and I'm gonna take the kind approach. And you're always you never regret that. You do regret emotional outbursts, but you don't regret being kind. So,
thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much
for being here.
Thank you, and to folks who are listening, I hope you listen to more of Maya's podcast because I think they're really good.
Thank you so much. I hope so too. But thank you so much for being here. If there's your book, When can we look for it?
Yep.
This is what it sounds like, fall of 2022.
Fall of 2022. Okay.
I'm quite excited about it and eager to hear what you think of it. I'll see if I can get it into your hands.
Oh, wow.
I'm
definitely going to.
Yeah, I'll be picking that up. I'm not an engineer, but I would love to read it.
Okay,
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Wait, don't go yet. If you've been loving Psych Mike, make sure you subscribe to the weekly newsletter, where you'll learn even more detailed approaches about how to get from where you are now to where you want to go with your psych background. When you sign up on psychmike.com, we will send you invaluable grad school resources, career advice, job opportunities, and early access to events that will help you learn to take your psych background to the next level. Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting Psych Mike, and I cannot wait to catch you next week.